Yeah, so thank you so much. I have to thank you as well for starting my education career as well by hiring me.
It was a good decision.
So what are you up to now? Can you talk specifically about your role with family engagement?
Yes, this is my second year in the role as Director of Family Engagement. And so one of the just joys of my job is getting to work with parents from each of the 21 campuses. We get together once a month and also just trying to help build the capacity at the campus level for engaging and connecting with families, which obviously things got turned on its head with COVID and we've had to pivot and try and come up with some alternative ways since we can't do some of the traditional things we like to do.
Yeah, do you have like can you think of an example that's come up where maybe you wouldn't do it the norm or you would like to do it the more traditional way, but you have had to adapt?
Well, one of the fun events that everybody loves with Hispanic Heritage Month is being able to have our potluck. And I always think about the grand times in the Agora and being able to have everybody together. Clearly, we can't do that type of thing anymore. So even our family fellows monthly meeting is online. So we all shared recipes and we were able to show what we were eating and enjoying and have fellowship in that regard.
Is there, I mean, I know it's a pandemic, so it's obviously different, but what kind of stood out to you as maybe an obstacle our district or just districts in general as far as engaging families, so especially in, low income areas?
Well, technology is obviously the biggest obstruction because there's a need to provide support in how to utilize the technology, not just to provide it. So from my work with my group of parents, I was very fortunate because I actually had already gone through the year before and getting a laptop for each of the campuses and training each of them in how to use Teams. And who knew that then suddenly we're all going to be using Teams. So they had the advantage of understanding not just, the on and off and to find this, but how to effectively engage with technology. And so we've been trying to do some workshops and putting together again a webinar and very visual things, not just words on a piece of paper. That's then posted on a website. So there's so much to communicate, and we all don't receive information in the same way. So that's been a big lift. How to do it.
I'm thinking about you going from a role where now you are connected with all the campuses, but you're not necessarily,
Mm.
on a one campus thing. So what talk us through like, the adjustment you've had of not being, hey, I'm the principal of Yes Prep Fifth Ward, whereas now, I have my toe in every campus.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you know well, I value tremendously the connection and the relationships with the people, so I miss the campus-based work that gives me so much joy to be able to see students and teachers interacting each and every day. I'm grateful for the opportunity to then, as you mentioned, like put your toe in and see what's going on across the organization and be able to figure out how can we leverage things that are going well? How can we take those pockets of excellence and expand that to other places? But on a personal level, yes, I I deeply miss the connection, not just to the campus staff, students, and families, but also to the community. I still try to stay connected with for the Fifth Ward Redevelopment Corporation and just the churches in the area. And so being a part of a community like that, you're very embedded in it, and I miss that.
Yeah, move for me, moving schools, it's one of those things where Fifth Ward was all I knew. So
Mhm.
moving to a new school that's new and hasn't been embedded in the community, I now realize how much of a symbol and how embedded in the community Fifth Ward was and how much I enjoyed that. Once it's gone, then you kind of reflect and say, wow, um, that was so great. What's your work schedule like? Because so through people, through your wide network, I was wanting to know, kind of soliciting questions as well. And um, your work schedule came up a lot as far as how tenacious and the crazy hours you would work at Fifth Ward. I think people said like she works till 9 p.m. every day of the week except maybe one day of the week, a Wednesday, I think you take off or something like that. So what's going from that to I guess now?
Yeah. Well, one, I don't recommend that as a best practice. It was a lot of work to get to a place where I felt that I could take that Wednesday night off, and that's silly. However, it's just such all-encompassing work when you are deeply invested in the community and with the students and the staff, and so you just feel like you're never going to get it all done, but you want to give everything that you have to make that happen. Now I feel like I have more control over my schedule and my time, other than clearly when I'm working with families, the best time for them is not in the traditional work day. So like next week we have our parent meeting, and it's from 6:30 to 8 in the evening. And then Thursday night, there's a family workshop on how to use the family portal from 5 to 6. So there's, nighttime things, or, occasional Saturday events. But as far as the actual normal work day, it's more in line with the school day instead of bleeding into 9 p.m. at night.
So I think one of the things that I was thinking of, and I was kind of realizing it recently, where I thought a lot of the people that you hired and you managed and helped them grow are now themselves either school leaders or just leaders, not only in the district, but also overall. So what, I guess, I don't know, what do you look for when you're hiring someone, maybe even as a teacher or even just as a leader that you're going to manage?
You're looking for good people. You're looking for people who obviously care about kids, who are, humble enough to accept feedback and give it. As you well know, like that's got to be a reciprocal process, and just, committed to their own personal growth and development. You can do a lot when you're able to laugh at yourself and realize, like for many years, I have to say, this is 27 years in, I was just so afraid of failing, just so afraid to make a mistake. And a lot of type A folks are drawn to this work, but the reality is you're going to make mistakes every day. I still make mistakes every single day, and being able to roll with that and understand it's just an opportunity for growth, fail forward, let's move on and make decisions that are in the best interests of our kids.
So was there a certain experience where like you learned that and said, okay, or was it just you maturing as a leader? Just a natural process?
There is nothing like stepping in to take over a campus, to kick you in the behind. Mr. Little, when he speaks to you, can share that first year's experience. You simply don't know what you don't know. And those around you will make sure you're aware of it very quickly. And so you just you have to iterate, you have to change quickly, you have to realize. And over time, then people see that that you are good for your word and that they can trust in that. And then you make fewer mistakes. But honestly, it was just, I would say that first year of school leadership was the one that taught me that most quickly.
And then even you deciding to take one day a week off, even though you're working crazy hours, you obviously came to a point where you could do it, but actually sitting down and saying, hey, I am going to take this off. Is that a conversation with your family? Is that you just feeling comfortable enough and confident enough to do that?
That was me just realizing this is not sustainable for myself, and it's not a good model for other people. When folks are getting emails at 8 at 9 at night, and just because I've sent it out, like, great, okay, my work's done, but that means that's stress on somebody else who's opening their laptop in the morning and they see they've got 8 emails, and it just creates this flurry of work that isn't maybe the best use of time. So you just it becomes like an addictive behavior, the amount of work that you're doing, and so you really have to modulate and regulate that. And I wanted more time for my family. They deserve that. And so that was my baby step into figuring out how to bring more balance. I used to spend 8 hours doing staff notes on Sunday. 8 hours. I had to time it for a coach one time. I got it down to 2 hours. It's there's more important things than getting the pictures just the right size, or getting the message to read just how you want it. You have to be okay. 80%, sometimes good is good enough.
Yeah, I'm just imagining first year school director Barb Campbell versus, fifth year or whatever, and you resizing the photos and then realizing, okay, I gotta pick it up.
Yeah.
So what, I guess for like resident school directors or school directors that may start next year, or even the ones that started this year, I mean, I can't imagine being a principal starting
Yeah.
this year, but what would be advice for them, um, just leadership overall, but then, coming into a school and leading it?
Well, I think you have to be your authentic self. You got to lean into the strengths that you have, recognize those things that you're good at, look to someone where you know that it's a place that you need to grow. Find that mentor, that person, whether it's somebody on that campus or on another campus, to be able to spend some time with, because you're only going to get that much better in that thing that you've always struggled with, whether that be time management or instructional IER feedback. So I just think it's a better use of your time to figure out how you're going to maximize the things that you are good at and that brought you to this place and space where you were hired to take on the role, and be confident that you're gonna do your very best.
So how did you, I guess going back, you were principal of obviously Yes Prep Fifth Ward, but then before that, I know you used to
Mm.
teach, where was it, Kingwood? Is that right?
Yep, I was at Kingwood High School for 17 years.
So, and then you graduated from Notre Dame, right? So then
Back in
so you,
1988. Do the math. I know.
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
old.
So you, so you graduated and then you jumped straight into education as a teacher?
Yeah, actually, I did. When I went off, when I started at Notre Dame, I thought for sure I was going to be an engineer. My dad's an engineer. I have two siblings who are engineers. I was good at math and science. Um, and in the back, so I started off in all the engineering classes, but once I got into those classes and I was looking around and Fun Physics Friday that was happening, that's what they called it. And I'm like, these are not my people. I am not in my element. And so I actually went to the Career Center. The freshman year of studies had a wonderful place and space to like explore what might be your best fit. And I did some weird career sort inventory thing, and education popped up. So between my heart tugging me in that direction and that tool saying that, I took a psychology class in the spring semester. I was like, oh my God, this is so much fun. Like I'm passionate about studying this. I'm excited about what I'm reading. And so that's what I ended up majoring in. And then I actually got the job at Kingwood High School to teach psychology and AP psychology. So that was just such a gift to be able to teach what I majored in and what I was passionate about. Did that for 7 years. And by that point, I had 3 kids, and that third kid pushed me over the edge financially. It actually was going to cost me more to go to work than it would to stay home. So I took a year off. And then they asked me to come back and start what was called small learning communities. So I worked in both service learning and advisory at Kingwood High School for the next decade before coming to Yes.
And then you saw, a leadership position at Yes and said, that's where I want to be, or was it just like the mission overall, that brought you from, because they're pretty different as far as districts, let's say.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So what brought me there is I went to Rice to do the education entrepreneurship program and got my MBA, and I encountered Chris Barbick, the founder of Yes, and we started having conversations and got super excited actually about creating a partnership between the districts, because for me, I was all about like, how can we take what's happening in the charter space and help improve what's happening in a traditional school setting. So that's how I actually entered the organization, with the intention of that partnership. And they had something called the Leading Excellence Fellowship. And so I spent a year at North Central doing the groundwork for that partnership that ended up not coming to fruition. So I stayed as the middle school principal there at North Central before coming over to be the school director at Fifth Ward.
So normally I would ask like, what's one thing someone outside of education doesn't know? But then I'm thinking now more, I think there's a huge disconnect between districts like Yes Prep and then, your Kingwood districts or HISD. So having worked in both, what is something that maybe one side doesn't know about the other side as far as, resources or just what goes on daily in the classroom?
Well, I think there's a lot of myths still about the charter space. And Unfortunately, I think even over time, we haven't been able to dispel a lot of them. The notion that we, cream kids and we're, selective and we don't serve students with special needs, and that we just aren't held accountable to those same standards. And I certainly would argue the case that we do that and then some. So as far as, what people don't know, do you want me to focus on the between traditional ISD and charter, or what
Sure.
people generally still don't know about teaching in general?
I mean, traditional ISD versus charter.
Yeah. I think that's probably a whole separate podcast, JB, and I would want to be very careful on that front. So I'm not sure I want to probe deeper onto that.
I mean, maybe I'll bring, I'll have you on and then have someone who I know believes the complete opposite and just have it. I mean, I know that's such a hotly debated topic, and one that I just am very unaware of, because I think the more I talk to people from outside of Yes, or who've had experience outside of Yes, the more I realize that it's such a bubble as far as what I know, because this is all I've known. So I'm thinking, there is a world outside of Yes, as weird as that may seem on a day-to-day basis. There are schools that are not called Yes Prep at the beginning of it.
Yeah.
What's I don't want to put you on the spot, but I always like to have each guys talk kind of about like a funny memory with a student, or just because I when I think of myself, I don't have any funny moments, but I think more about like impactful moments that stick with me, whether that was like your first year teaching or your first year as school director, that you remember even to this day. Do you have any that you can think of?
Well, certainly my funniest teaching memory is really, really terrible. And it was when I was student teaching and I was trying to explain what a cognitive map was to a group of seniors. And so a cognitive map, just if you don't know, is that notion of like, if you're driving to work, you may not be able to describe to somebody exactly the streets you're taking, which turn, what's the name of this. You know that. And I'm like, like a squirrel when he buries his nuts. And then the children all start laughing and I'm chuckling because I'm, 21 years of age. And I'm thinking, what's another example I can come up with that doesn't come off this way? I'm like, or a dog when he buries his bone. Like at this point, I literally am on the floor crying. The children, I've lost it. I have to step outside of the classroom. It was bad. That was really bad. But I think every one of those children know what a cognitive map is, to be clear. As far as thinking about other memories with students, all of the girls' conferences that we held at Fifth Ward and being able to spend, hours just into the middle of the night, giggling and laughing, sleeping on blow-up beds that are deflating as you're attempting to sleep. And all of those nights were definitely very memorable and humorous ones with the girls.
I think the nut story is both impactful and funny when it comes to how they learned that.
But I do want to share an impactful one too from my time at Kingwood High School when I was helping with service learning as an instructional coach. We had students in a class that was practical writing class, so they needed extra support with writing, and oftentimes it was difficult to motivate them to see the point of like, why do I have to write this? And so we took them actually to a nursing home out here in Kingwood, and they went and they interviewed the residents, and then they had to come back and write the story, the life story of that resident. Then we had the residents come to the high school for cookies one afternoon, and they're all coming in their walkers and their wheelchairs, and the kids had to then read what they had produced and present it to the person they interviewed. And so, I mean, it was a very powerful project in and of itself. However, in that time frame, it was about a 6-week project. One of the residents, his wife, who wasn't one of the ones that was interviewed, had passed away. And he asked this young man to read his wife's life story. Oh my gosh, could have heard a pin drop as this 11th grader who never realized the power of words, is standing up there and sharing his wife's life story and handing it to him. That's just a moment I will always remember. And then at Fifth Ward, certainly everything after Harvey, I've memories of sitting around Cindy and Terry's table as people just naturally gravitated to call every single one of the families, check in on our kids, and make grocery runs. And yeah, that was a time that you realized the power of the team and the collaboration, and just what was being built was pretty special at Fifth Ward.
Yeah, I want to thank you, because, and it's one of those things where, and again, it's no slight against Northwest or anything like that, but like you were saying, feeling welcomed and feeling comfortable and feeling like I can be myself as not only a teacher, but a very new teacher who's struggling, who wants to quit, who doesn't know if this is the right thing for him. Having that team, not just my grade level team, with the great members that were on it, and I was lucky, but just knowing that I had you, and not just as the principal, but I always knew that no matter what, no matter if I disagree with Barb on what initiative or what email or anything, I knew that at any point I could email you or I could talk to you or anything like that, even as a first year teacher. And I think now when I look back on it, I think I'm in education, you know, not only because you hired me, but also because you constantly checked in, not just with me, but with other teachers. And I think when I look back on your leadership, I think that's the thing that stands out to me. So I wanted to let you know, because now it's been 5 years in education, and I just think back to that time. I'm getting kind of emotional, but
I
I
know
think
you'll make me
back.
cry, JB.
Yeah, I know. And I was just thinking, like, it means so much to have someone who cares about your growth. And even when you said, JB, do you want to move up to 8th grade? And I said, no, my grade level team's really good. And I felt so satisfied. I had Kelly Lewis, and she was like, don't, if you don't want to do it, don't do it. And so I was like, oh yeah. I was like, she's gonna make me do it. I'm just a first year teacher. And she's like, no, say no. So then I went in there and I said, no, I'm not gonna do it. And then you came back later and you're like, actually, you need to move up to 8th grade. And then now looking back on it, I am so glad. I mean, that class that I could have for 2 years, 8th grade, was so awesome. So now looking back on it, I'm like, it truly changed my life. And I mean that in the best way possible. So thank you so much.
Well, I'm glad. I know you're mad at me, and it just, those are the hard parts of leadership, is having to make those tough decisions.
Well, I don't know if the meeting will end automatically at 5.
I don't think so.
Okay, because I did want to ask just one more question,
Yeah,
and
sure.
one that I'm genuinely curious about. Obviously, with your husband and his job and kind of all the confusion and all that stuff that went, what and the answer could be I don't know, but what are your, like, are you really satisfied with your role? Or is it because it's a pandemic, you'll give it another year? Do you want to go back into school leadership? Kind of what's your next year or next 5 years look like?
Yeah, that is a good question. As I look at them as such a tumultuous last year, and with departure, and then I'm not leaving, it was definitely difficult, because as I said, I don't think I could have ever chosen to leave Fifth Ward had it not been for forces outside of my control, clearly wanting to stay in my marriage, just because I was so deeply embedded. And at the same time, I also think there's something to be said. I remember JB, the other JB, Jeremy Beard, saying within school leadership, there's actually some evidence to show within, whether it's within the charter world, but at about 5 years, like, that's kind of like the max that, and I was in year 6. I'm like, why didn't you tell me that at the beginning of, at the end of year 5 before year 6?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think there is a way, like, in being able to pass the baton and have somebody have fresh eyes, that actually is good for the evolution of a school. So there's like a sweet spot of being able to have your impact. And I'm so grateful for the years that I got to spend in growing out of campus. Like I said, I'll always, Fifth Ward is just part of my heart, my DNA. And I do plan to continue to be involved with the surrounding community for many, many years. I feel like my passion around families is something that has always been there. I was, on the PTA at, Kingwood High School, and like a lifelong member, given some lifetime membership award or what have you. And then just loved the space with the families who always kept things in check for me, and their perspective while I was serving there at Fifth Ward. So I think it's kind of a natural evolution, and gives me an opportunity to see things from a different vantage point. So I feel like I still have some value to add in that space, but even at 50 years of age, which I can proudly state, so you don't have to do the math, I still feel like I'm, young in my career. You'll be 28 years. I can technically retire next year. I could retire after Christmas, which is wild to me. I still feel like I'm 18. I feel like I'm just getting started. And so, it's interesting to learn a few things and figure out then what is the next thing, and where can I add value? I don't know that I would go back into school leadership in the sense that so much of that was that community, right? And I think I would always just longing for that connection that existed, and I don't know if I have it in me to build that over again. Maybe I am too old for that. I don't know. So never say never. All the doors are open, in my opinion. I like to make sure I just keep sharpening my skills and see where I can best use my skills.
Yeah, well, I'm excited to see. I can't imagine you as a 23-year-old starting to teach when you were working the hours that you were working at, mid 40s. I mean, you would just stay at the school, I'm sure.
Well, funny story on that front too. First of all, I made $22,000 a year for 3 years. My first 3 years of teaching, I was making $22,000. I started dating my husband. He literally, this is before we actually were dating. I had my little Mac, those little Mac things with the floppy disks. I'd be typing a test. I would fall asleep. He would finish typing my handwritten test into the computer for me and leave it there because I just would fall asleep. So it's like everybody, your first year teaching is brutal. It doesn't get better till about year 3.
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you so much for taking the time, and I was excited for this episode, not just for the podcast, but even just for my own insight into your head, and not just seeing you as the principal, but now seeing you as just someone I can get knowledge from, and kind of take from what you've learned and advice you have into my own career.
Anytime, JB. I think you still have my cell number too. So I'm just a phone call away. I'm so proud of you. You're doing incredible work. And I hope, when do you finish at Columbia?